Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. My name is Pilar Orti, and I'm the director of Virtual Not Distant, a company where we help managers of remote teams to get the most out of online collaboration. You can find out everything we do over at virtualnotdistant.com. Hello and welcome to a special episode of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. And it's special because the content of this episode was created as part of something else. So Simon Wilson and myself, you will have met Simon in the 300th anniversary celebrations and also in a previous episode on asynchronous facilitation. Simon and I are working on an audio-first self-paced course on asynchronous communication. So this is a course that, rather than many courses where the main primary way of giving you information is video or text, we imagine people first going to audio. So audio first and then with some text to support it or replace it if you're not audio inclined. And what's really interesting is that we hadn't thought of this course as being an audio first. It was not until we arrived at what you're going to listen today, which was just going to be additional material in the traditional sense, written first, audio second. So this was going to be additional material. And when we recorded this episode, and then we did another module as well, we thought, maybe this might work as an audio first course. And as you know, I love audio, so we're going to try that. I think it's a reminder that when we're thinking about doing something, when we're creating something for the first time, we just need to get something out there as soon as possible. This is nothing new, but sometimes we forget. We could have been working on these worksheets forever, and then actually there's a different medium that was giving the material a much better angle. So this episode is going to be about 20 minutes, and we recorded it back in May. We have changed something, so I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts. And of course, I'd like to invite you to be a better listener for our course, because what you're going to hear, we adopted quite a colloquial, a very informal approach to it. But we've then decided, we then started recording the rest and actually thought that a more formal tone was better for a course delivery. But that's why we're going to have some better listeners around October 2022, and we'd love you to join us. If you want to become a better listener, you can go to virtualnotdistant.com, and we have a page called Your Opinion. It's under resources, or virtualnotdistant.com/your-opinion. And of course, I'll stick the link in the show notes. To give you an idea of time commitment, if you want to be a better listener for us, we have 8 modules. 2 of them have been split into 2 parts. Still working on them, still editing. And they're all between 12 and 20 minutes max. So work it out. That is the amount of commitment that you will need. You can just listen to the audio, or you can also have a look at the materials. It's up to you. And we would love your feedback. But for now, here we go. Let's see what you think of it. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we look at why psychological safety in our team is important when we're introducing asynchronous communication. Now, listeners, this audio conversation is actually a part of a self-paced course that we are currently creating for managers of remote teams. And we wanted to release it here as part of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast because we believe in visible teamwork and in the concept of working out loud as creators. And by we, I mean, my name is Pilar Orti. I'm the host of this podcast, in case we haven't met before, and I'm the director of Virtual Not Distant. And with me is Simon Wilson, a very experienced facilitator who's part of Wilson Sheriff. And we are working together on this self-paced course on asynchronous collaboration. Simon, is there anything that you want to say to listeners before we start?
Well, Pilar, I suppose just to say that as a facilitator, this term psychological safety has, if you like, suddenly appeared on the landscape over the last couple of years. And I think I understand the tone, but one of the most important questions for me is, so what do we do about it? How do we enable psychological safety? And that's a big part, I think, of what we want to explore today.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear listener. It's great to be with you at whatever time of the day you happen to find yourself. Simon and I have decided to cover the concept of psychological safety over audio. And there are some reasons for this, which are, well, at the core of psychological safety is emotion. So we thought that a medium which transmitted how we felt about the topic was probably the best. There is also a reason for us to be working on this module synchronously, Simon and I. We are going to talk to each other in real time, although with you, the listener, we are communicating asynchronously. So the reason for talking this module through is that as we talk through the material, the full experience of being with the other person is likely to bring up memories and reflections in us in a different way than if we were communicating via text. So we hope to pass some of that on to you. We're using audio only as a matter of preference. Pilar and Simon can think better. Actually, yes, both of us. I'm looking at my notes. Pilar and Simon can both think better when they're not worrying about being seen on camera, and audio only, of course, allows for this. Plus, in this way, we can use the script more comfortably than working from our notes or a teleprompt. We'll also include, though, a summary of our conversation in text for you to refer to later, or even to share with your team members. But right now, we encourage you to take notes as you listen. In particular, think about, is this what I'm experiencing with my team? Given what I'm hearing, what small change could I make to improve things? Or what are we already doing that I should make sure we continue doing? And what are the challenges here for myself as a manager?
Thank you, Pilar. What I want to move on to is, what is psychological safety? And psychological safety is defined as a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And that definition is taken from How to Create Psychological Safety in Virtual Teams by Alexandra Lechner and Jutta Tobias Mortlock. Another description is that psychological safety is not to be mistaken for trust, however. And one key differentiating factor is that trust can only exist in the relationships between two people. So Pilar and I trust each other, while psychological safety permeates an entire group. Psychological safety has also become quite a popular context. So we've heard a lot about psychological safety in meetings, and both Pilar and I refer to it in our books and blog posts. But why is it psychological safety important in asynchronous communication?
Well, when we're looking at asynchronous communication, of course, we are still working in the open. In a meeting, we can see who's there, we're there, and we speak. And unless we're recording, the information we're given disappears. Whereas in asynchronous communication, we're making a record. That's the whole point, that someone else can access later. We comment on others' works, we discuss in chat room style apps, we share the progress of our tasks, and we need to be doing this feeling safe, because we need to know who's accessing the information, and we need to know that it's not going to be held against us.
So if people don't feel safe, we need to consider why they might avoid communicating asynchronously in the open. There's the general idea, I guess, about having had past negative experiences where my ideas were not respected, where I was put down or possibly even ignored. Now, that's bad enough to happen in a meeting when time passes on and maybe it's water under the bridge. But to see this in an asynchronous communication, that means that there may be a permanent record of the fact that you were ignored or put down. You might need to consider, will I look bad if I admit my mistakes? How will my ideas land? And will it be shared beyond the group? And perhaps even more importantly, if I say something which is not seen as appropriate, will it be held against me in the future? And I think, Pilar, you have a story about a friend of yours where this happened.
Yes, he runs or used to lead a team, and what he found was that he tried to introduce more of asynchronous ways of working, even recording presentations for each other, or again introducing a chat-based style apps. And what he found was that people still wanted to get together in meetings to talk because they felt that if they shared what they were thinking asynchronously, that could be held against them later. So I think this really blew my mind, because at the beginning I'd never thought of this extra dimension of sharing our work and putting our thoughts down in writing. But when he said that, I thought, yes, therefore there's something going on, that they either don't feel safe in the team or within the organization.
Psychological safety also, I think, is not experienced in the same way by everybody. So some of the factors that you might want to think about are geography and culture, for instance. I work quite a lot with international groups, and in some cultures, there's, if you like, a culture of speaking up. And in others, there's a culture of holding back. And maybe that's also associated with the idea that if you do speak up, maybe something bad will happen. Maybe you don't feel entirely safe to speak up at that stage. That can also apply, of course, to different levels within an organization. So, how junior or how senior are you in the organization? And does your organizational culture mean that it's okay to make mistakes? Or actually, are mistakes frowned upon and you feel that actually there's no room to make a mistake? And I suppose the final thought on this is also the equality, diversity, and inclusion dimension. So, do some groups feel less safe than others within the wider group? That might be based on age, on gender, on race, but it's worth considering, is there something which is holding members of a group back from feeling safe to speak up or indeed to write things down and as part of the permanent record?
So I suppose when we start to think about introducing more asynchronous communication at different levels, we need to consider all of this. It's not just a question of saying, now we're going to work more in the open, or now we're going to use more writing to talk to each other, because there's all these dimensions. And Simon, the example when you were talking about sometimes the organizational culture might not be one of speaking out or making mistakes. We might be in a team where we want to nurture that culture, even though the wider organization is not supporting it. So I think with that, we need to find, okay, what are the private spaces where our team can talk asynchronously? Where are the spaces where no one else has access to them? In the same way as not all your meetings are public to all the organization, and to make sure that your team members understand that they are in a safe space within the team.
Indeed. And then there's something about thinking, what can we do to increase or sustain psychological safety in the team? So your starting point may not be that everyone feels completely safe. And I suppose the first thing that you can do is something around what's called contracting or ground rules or ways of working. It's about having a discussion with the team in terms of how they can feel safe working together. And obviously, in this case, an asynchronous discussion in which people may be submitting their thoughts at different times. Now, this is not the same as the team agreement, the technical agreement about, if you like, the rules and processes. It's more about questions like, what do I need to feel safe here? What do I need from my peers and fellow team members? And what are the risks in this conversation? And the really important thing in that contracting discussion is to recognize that different members of the group may be at different stages. Different members of the group may need different things. So some people, to feel safe, may need, if you like, permission to make a contribution. Other people, to feel safe, may need to express their views in a particular way. And then the group come together to consider, how do we want to work together in order to make sure that everyone feels safe? There are other things also which we can do to increase psychological safety in the team. Perhaps one of the most important of these is clarity in how we communicate and who is involved in the conversation. And I think, Pilar, you have an example of this.
Yes, I was on the Distant Job podcast talking about working out loud and asynchronous communication, working in the open. And the host asked me, this is all very well, but if I have, for example, my work, a document or something I'm working on in the open for my team, what do I do if I get unsolicited feedback? What do I do if
Yeah,
people are giving me feedback when actually I don't need that? And it's who needs to be involved in the conversation, and also understanding that there are times when we might not want some people's input as well.
absolutely. So the other thing to think about is, what happens if people make mistakes? So one of the things that we're often frightened of in terms of our contributions is, what if I get something wrong? And will I be put down or ignored or reprimanded for get something wrong? And this is where it can be really helpful to begin to see mistakes as learning opportunities. So if something goes wrong, consider, what happened and what can we learn from it? Or what could be different next time? And then make a point, not of dodging difficult conversations, but make a point of coming back to difficult conversations that get taken offline to close the loops. So you might want to say, look, I'm sorry, I messed this up. I sent the wrong document to the client. And then, what can we learn about that for the future? Are there changes to process and procedure which might help? And in that way, people become more able to open up about the issues and considerations they have and build that into a learning culture. I think there's also an important point, Pilar, isn't there, about starting and ending conversations or activities?
Yes, because sometimes we feel like conversations go on for ages, and this is something
Yeah.
that happens more in asynchronous communication than in meetings. Because in meetings, we have that time bound. However, in asynchronous, if we don't say, okay, we're going to finish this conversation at that point, etc., then they will go on forever. And the other thing is that sometimes we open up a conversation, and pretty much like in a meeting, we might hear crickets where there's just silence. That also happens in an asynchronous conversation, and we need to understand what's going on and not always feel that it's not being valued. So I think that this is another dimension.
Indeed. So if you do hear crickets, or maybe the equivalent is that you've posted something on a forum and there are no responses, it's really worth considering, well, what's happening here? Is this actually because people still don't feel safe to respond? Or are you building that safety? And actually, this is just reflection time. So, considering how those conversations open, how long to leave them, do you need to prompt? And then when you begin to close them down. And all of this, I think, really points to the importance of role modeling an effective approach as managers and leaders. So, considering how you share learning, thinking about what you are learning, and how you're feeling when things are difficult, and then being prepared to share those feelings with the team. Now, again, in terms of psychological safety, some managers struggle with this because they don't want to lose face. So that's how psychological safety affects them. And then it might be a matter of addressing trust in the team. So putting this to the team and saying, I'd like to share this with you. Are you comfortable to receive this? And how can we work together with this type of information, reflection, sense of feeling? So I guess some further thoughts perhaps around building and sustaining psychological safety, coming from quite recent research, are about accepting the virtual team challenges. So being really specific about what isn't working and what is, and then looking for opportunities and not always feeling that you have to change or replace what's taking place. Connecting as human beings, so taking every opportunity to be more human in communication. Because if you take the step to engage with others as a human being, they are likely to respond to that. So, it may be as small as uploading your avatar to every platform. And of course, being careful also about being intrusive, respecting how much people are comfortable to share. And again, recognizing difference here. So for some people, an inquiry about family, for instance, may be perfectly acceptable. For someone else, they may feel that they're being put on the spot, particularly if their family situation is not particularly comfortable. So it's also, I think, important to consider defining the rules of the game. So, which space, which tool, which virtual platform, thinking about the technology challenges and opportunities on your team agenda, because technology is a factor in how safe the team feels. So some people actually feel unsafe and uncomfortable in their use of technology and then don't want to be seen as not tech savvy. So making a fool of themselves with the use of technology. That's another area when working asynchronously where it can be really helpful to consider how to build safety in a team. I think the final point that I'd make about building and sustaining psychological safety is that this is not likely to be a quick fix. It may take time to achieve psychological safety in a team, especially if the current level of safety is low or it's a new team and people may have had bad past experiences. So it's about working with it, continuing to reflect, and above all, sharing with the team and encouraging them to contribute their thoughts about how that's progressing. So Pilar, I think that brings us to the close of our main thoughts. How would you sum this up?
Well, I would like to add as well that if we have low psychological safety in the team, we can start with having the asynchronous conversations in a way that feels less risky as well. So there are different levels of opening up, there are different levels of working out in the open. And if we sense that in our team, psychological safety is low, then maybe we can start with the ones that feel less psychologically risky. There is also the opportunity that if we slowly introduce these practices and guide the team and we follow some of the advice that Simon's been giving us, then we can actually increase the sense of safety as we go through sharing. So as Simon said, not something that we'll do in a day and something that, as you've seen, has many levels. So we've looked at why psychological safety is important in asynchronous communication, in asynchronous conversations. We've seen that we need to assess this level of psychological safety before we introduce these practices. We need clarity in what tool when, which conversation where, and above all, as managers or team leaders, we need to embrace the medium and role model and look out for each other. So, dear participant of the course, we hope you got some value from our conversation, and we now encourage you to go over the exercise we have prepared for you for this unit and even prepare a conversation to have with your team members. Thank you very, very much for listening. We would love to hear your feedback on this episode in particular, but also if you would like to become a better listener of our new audio first course on asynchronous communication, we'd love to have you on board. You can email me directly if you want, pilar@virtualnotdistant.com, or you can go to our website, virtualnotdistant.com/your-opinion, and there you can sign up as a beta listener. And of course, I'll stick the link in the show notes. Thank you very much for choosing to listen to the 21st Century Work-Life Podcast. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life Podcast. We know there are many other shows for you to choose from. Remember to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and you can check out the full show notes over at virtualnotdistant.com/podcasts. Talking of podcasts, we have another show you can listen to, Management Cafe, which you should also be able to find on all podcast apps. I have been Pilar Ortiz. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.